He's given us films like Diwar and Sholay, characters like Mogambo and Gabbar Singh, songs like Ek Do Teen and Kuch Na Kaho. He's the creator of The Angry Young Man, the composer of Breathless, the author of Tarkash. But all of that is what we know about him. What we don't know is what is he like. Let's see if he tells us as we meet Javed Akhtar. Javed, listening to that amazing range of productivity, so different, sometimes so contradictory, I feel I have to ask you, are you somewhat of a split personality?
I suppose all of us are. There are many a person in every person, and in different moments and in different relationships and in different situations, we tend to behave and act totally differently.
Okay, you were born into a family of poets, 7 generations of them, I believe, is that right?
Guilty.
And so were you predestined eventually one day to be a film lyricist, to be a poet yourself?
I don't know. Anyway, that is the side issue, that I don't believe in any what you call destiny. But I suppose that if you are born and brought up in a particular atmosphere and things are in the ambience, so obviously through some process of osmosis, a lot of information or understanding of that particular topic or subject or profession gets into you, whether you want it or you don't want it. And there is always a probability that you'll do that.
Okay, go back to the beginning of your childhood and tell me what was it like. Because on the one hand, it was a family of poets. On the other hand, your parents were also committed communists.
Well, I remember my parents and their friends and their meetings and those little gatherings where they would recite poetry and listen poetry and heated discussions. And I would obviously not understand totally what they are saying, but one used to hear about the inqilab that is round the corner and going to happen any moment, any day.
So it is a very political household, full of passion and emotion.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
What about Stalin? I believe he played a role in your childhood, didn't he?
Oh yes, obviously. He was the icon. He was the hero at that time of the communists in India. And every communist house used to have big portraits of Stalin hanging on the walls. And when I was 5 or 6, I was totally convinced that somebody must have told me that Stalin is my grandfather. And when by the age of 7 or 8 I realized that it is not so, I was rather disappointed.
Okay, in those early years, Javed in fact wasn't your name. They used to call you something else, didn't they?
Yes, I have a pet name, and even today all my old friends, childhood friends and my family call me by that particular pet name, that is Jadoo.
So Javed came as a way of justifying Jadoo, did it?
That's true, that's true. It has one little cute story. I was born in Gwalior in a hospital, and my father and his friends came from the Communist Party office there, and one of them had that Communist Manifesto in a hand. So somebody mentioned that when a Muslim child is born, they read azan in his ear. So they said, well, we have different convictions and different beliefs, so what we should do. So my father decided, he took that Communist Manifesto and he read the Communist Manifesto in my ear. And then the name was discussed, what should be the name of the child. So somebody pointed out that when you had married my mother, you had written a poem that had a line, Lamha lamha kisi jadoo ka fasana hoga. So why don't you call, this is Jadoo and this is the fasana you were talking about, so why don't you call this child Jadoo? So they started calling me Jadoo. And for perhaps first 2 years or 3 years, my name was only Jadoo. But when they decided now Jadoo is grown up enough to go to KG, they thought, and others also said that now come on, enough is enough, and find a name for the child. So my name Javed was decided because of my pet name. Generally the pet names are made accordingly by the proper name, but
in your case it happened the other way around.
Happened the other way around.
But in fact you went through quite a lonely childhood. In a sense, you lost your parents when you were quite young. Your father left home and remarried. Your mother died when you were 8. Were you conscious of being lonely?
Not at all. I was never a lonely child. I was an extremely sociable child. I was an extrovert, And I had a lot of friends, and I used to get along with a lot of people. And as a matter of fact, right from my early childhood, I used to have friends who were much elder than me.
But you were very close to your mother. What memories do you have of her?
She was an avid reader. She was a writer herself. And when I was in first standard, she was reading a novel, a very thick, big novel. I suppose it was a Russian novel. And every day when I would come back from the school, she would narrate a chapter to me. I mean, she would not read out to me, but she would tell me
The story.
the story. And it was so exciting that in the bus when I was used to come back, I would be excited and thinking what will happen now in the story. And she used to tell me a lot of stories. She taught me Urdu. I have not learned Urdu in a school. I have learned it at home. And she had a bag, and she would cut capital letters from different magazines or books and stick them on a cardboard piece and put them in that bag. So it used to have a lot of these like jigsaw puzzle pieces. And when I would come back from the school, this was the game she used to play with me.
So in a very real sense, Javed the storyteller and Javed the Urdu poet was created by his mother.
Yeah, I suppose so. Because she used to tell me, I was 6 or 7, but she used to tell me that when you will grow up, I'm sure you'll become a writer and a poet. She used to say that.
Okay, but long before you became a writer and a poet, you went through some pretty memorable and extreme circumstances. I mean, I gather when you left home to go to college, you were flat broke, and you survived picking the pockets of your friends. Is that right?
Well, that is how I belong to the majority of the country. Most of us go through it.
During those bad days, there was a very good friend of yours in college, Mushtaq, and you became very close. He housed you, he fed you, and when you parted, you took from him a souvenir that I believe you've always kept with you.
Yeah, he was my class fellow, and incidentally he was a Sikh, he was a Sardar, and a wonderful friend, wonderful friend. But then I had a lot of wonderful friends, and for 4 years when I was in college, I mean, thanks to my friends that I survived.
What was the souvenir he gave you? Do you have it?
Yes, of course, he gave me his kala. This I wore in 1964, and it will be with me till my dying day.
Loyalty and these sort of symbols of friendship and attachment mean a lot to you, do they?
No, I'm very thankful to my friends. My friends have been very helpful in my life. I was in Bhopal for 4 or 5 years, and for most of the time, it was my friends who looked after me. They clothed me, they gave me food, they gave me shelter more often. When I came to Bombay, and when I left my father's house, I had exactly 27 NP. Now I think you don't get 2 NP coin, but there was a time when it was possible to have only 27 NP. And my friends, I had some friends in Bombay. They took care of me. They helped me. So I have a kind of a tribal loyalty towards my friend.
And in fact, those early days in Bombay when you got there, I believe you arrived there in October 64, was some very difficult times for you. You often had to sleep out in the open. Occasionally, you even slept in caves.
My friend, Bombay's population, or Mumbai's population to be
Politically correct.
Politically correct, is around 1 crore. A little more, as a matter of fact. And almost 55% people live either in the slums or on the pavements.
So you were one of those 55%.
So I was from that 55%. So often it has been asked, and so often I have said that I get embarrassed. I feel that, am I trying to sell my sorrows? Am I telling them to see, there I was and how far I have come?
So you're embarrassed? Are you embarrassed by
Yeah,
it?
it slightly embarrasses me. I'll tell you why. Because when people talk of their bad days, they are not talking of their bad days. They are telling you in a very subtle manner that see how far I have come.
During those difficult days, before you'd actually made it, you stumbled across Meena Kumari's Filmfare Awards one day.
Yes.
And
yes,
that
yes.
really gave your ambition a focus, didn't it?
See, I was working with Mr. Kamal Amrohi production, and since I had no place to live, I used to sleep in the dressing room of Mahal Pictures. That was the name of the production. It was a big room with a lot of cupboards that had costumes of Pakiza and other pictures. And since I had no money, I couldn't go anywhere in the evening, so I would spend my time in the dressing room, opening cupboards, looking at the costumes, shoes, and artificial jewelry, and so on and so forth. And one day I opened one particular drawer that was full of old shoes and sandals. And in that drawer, along with these shoes, I found 3 Filmfare trophies of Meena Kumari. This was the first time I had touched a trophy, an award, film award. And obviously Filmfare trophy was some kind of a fantasy for me, like for an average American Oscar is some kind of a fantasy. I mean, it happens to people.
But you also decided there and then, I want these for myself.
Of course. I always wanted that. So I kept it, and I would stand in front of the mirror of the dressing room, holding that trophy and fantasizing that one day I'll get it. But thankfully I have 10 of them now.
And when success came, because it did come and it came in a big way, was it sweet?
Yes, of course, it excites you, but ultimately...
You don't sound excited at all,
no,
I'll tell you why. Resigned.
No, I'll tell you. When you get it, you do feel excited. But ultimately, when you achieve what you are fantasizing all the time, you feel slightly empty of desire. And that makes you, shall I say, depressed. I'm saying it for the want of a better word. But you feel cheated. So this is what I wanted, and I got it.
Cheated because it's not what you thought it would be?
Yes, it doesn't give you that kind of high, that kind of happiness which you thought will give you.
Achievement is hollow.
I don't know. I say they say that the fear of danger is bigger than the danger itself. I suppose that the desire of the success is definitely bigger than the success itself.
Okay, let's take a break at that point, Javed. I want to come back in part 2 and talk to you how success perhaps has also changed the Javed Akhtar and created the one we have in front of me today. But first, a little commercial break. Don't go away. We'll be back in just a couple of moments. Welcome back to Face to Face. My guest is Javed Akhtar. Javed, we ended part 1 at the point where you just become successful, but success also changed your life. One of the things that happened is that your marriage with Hani Irani broke up.
I believe that Hani is a very fine person, and it's rather strange that after the divorce, gradually we became very good friends. And today, if you ask me to name 3 very good friends in Bombay, she'll be one of them. But somehow, in spite of mutual respect and mutual love, as a matter of fact, we were very different people in many, many aspects. And somehow that became much more important than this mutual love. And I still feel a kind of love for her. It's the love of a friend. And she also cares for me, I know that. And we have great respect for each other. And if she asks me, I'll do anything for her. And vice versa, I'm quite sure. But we couldn't get along as husband and wife.
In your essay on yourself on the internet, you write that you first met Shabana in 79 and your marriage with Hani broke up in 83. Was there a connection between the two?
I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, it is like which one is the cart and which is the horse. I don't know. You see, a third person only enters in a marriage when there is a crack. And if a third person enters the crack widens. So it is it's chicken and egg situation. But that is how it happened.
2 other things also began happening at this point in time. You write that you went through a phase when you were drinking heavily. You write that you could almost have killed yourself. You were drinking so much.
That's true.
What brought that about? Unhappiness? Frustration?
You see, if you can be that clear about the problem, you won't drink. A time comes when you feel things are wrong and you are not able to analyze or hold the bull by its horns, and you get confused and you lose nerve, or perhaps you find the easy way out, you behave like an ostrich or whatever. And that's what I was doing. I'm quite sure that Hani must have been quite taken aback by the divorce, so was I. And it took me at least 2-3 years to get over this kind of shock. There was guilt, there was a very confused feeling within me. And it took certain toll, but it took a little time to recover from it.
And the other thing that began happening around this time is that you started writing poetry. Was that a sort of response for the emotion, the trauma you were going through?
You see, I suppose a lot of things happened to me after 1976. My first flush of success was over. My father died in 76. The marriage was on the rocks. My relationship with my partner, Salim Saab, was no longer what you call ideal. So things were changing. And there was a kind of a disappointment, discontent. I don't know whether with my circumstances, with the people around me, or with my own self, but there was some kind of disturbance in me. And that was the time when I started writing poetry. That was the time I started going away from the people who were near in that given situation. And that was the time I was changing. I don't know, I mean, it is for others to decide what I was and what I became. But one thing is for sure, that a lot of me changed. I don't know, for good or for worse.
Your life went through a whirlpool, but when the pieces fell back together, in a sense they fell back together around Shabana. Is she now the new anchor in your life?
Shabana has been a great help, I must say, and a kind of a balm. Although I'm still not clear what was the wound, but she is the balm, that is for sure. And my friends and people who know me since so many years, they do say that I'm much more staid, much more at peace with myself, and much more organized emotionally and mentally.
What does she mean to you? What role does she play in your life?
She is perhaps the most important person in my life.
And yet the funny thing is, during the days when you were creating characters in movies, you never once created a person like Shabana. You created an angry young man. Shabana, for so many people, is an angry young woman, but there's no equivalent of her in your creation, is there?
But you must notice one thing, that in all my films, right from the beginning, films that I wrote within that team, with Salim Saab, and films that I wrote individually, heroine may not be the central figure of the script, but she is always an independent-minded, strong, individualistic person. She's never a submissive or dumb blonde.
So
Never.
Shabana was there in the mind, even if not in the flesh.
It is not that. I suppose, I mean, if you are brought up by a woman who is a person in her own right, who is a writer, who is a thinker, who is intelligent and has a personality, and then you see women in your family as you are growing up, all of them are working women and thinking people, participating in political discussions. So you would have, these are the women you admire and respected as you are growing up. So this is the image you will have.
But you know, the image that one has of women from your movies is the image of mother from Diwar. And at the end of the day, that's a conservative, traditional, perhaps even a slightly cliched image. That mother is almost everything that those of us who know Shabana from outside would say Shabana is not.
No, as a matter of fact, in the same film we had another very interesting character that was, it was a cameo, but a very interesting character played by Parveen Babi. In Trishul, you had a very strong mother who knows that this man is not going to marry me, but she decides to have this illegitimate child and live with that child and dies with dignity. And then he comes across another woman who's a working woman, Rakhi. And again, she is a very strong-headed person and has her own opinion about things and has her own dignity and so on. Or any film you see, in any of my films, you will see that the heroine or the woman in a hero's angry man's life is not a weak woman at all.
In fact, strong women have played a very important role in the personal life of Javed Akhtar. Your mother was a strong, forceful character that molded you, and Shabana is a strong, forceful woman who's played a role in the recreation of you. You like strong women, don't you?
I like strong people. I like people who have dignity and self-respect. Why only strong women?
But are you particularly drawn towards that forcefulness in a woman?
No, I can respect people who respect themselves. I mean, if you don't respect yourself, why should I respect you?
Okay, you've now branched out in the last few years into yet another different direction. You've begun doing music not just for the Hindi film world, but music for what I would call listening pleasure, co-productions. Is that how you see the future lying?
See, music is finding in India, there was a time when only film music was viable and used to reach people, but thanks to the electronic media, uh, other kind of music has also found a lot of inroads in society. So what you call, we have a strange um, uh, term for it, we call them private albums. I don't know what are these what's so private about these albums, but these private albums means actually non-film albums. So these non-film albums are also finding their market is expanding.
But do they challenge you? Do they give you opportunities that
Oh
perhaps
yes.
film music doesn't?
No, they are different. That's a different kind of a ball game. You know, if in film music you write the song for a particular situation, and more often than not to a particular tune. But when you're writing an album, then you're free. You have your own situation. You decide what kind of songs you would like to write for this album, what should be the wavelength and so on, what should be the temperament, because these songs are not the part of a narrative. That's the basic difference. Then you can be perhaps two rungs higher and can afford to be a little more subtle or more literary than what you can be in a film song, because you have to be a little more bothered about the lowest common denominator in a film song than in this
Here
album.
you have a freedom
Yes.
that you don't in the Hindi
Yes,
music
yes,
industry.
that's true. That's true.
Okay, Javed, let me bring this interview to an end by taking you back to the age of 8. It's the day after your 8th birthday. Your mother's just died. Your aunt takes you to see her for the last time. And she gets you to make a promise to your mother. Do you remember the promise?
Yes, I do.
What was it?
I remember that my aunt was crying, and I saw my mother lying uh, wrapped in a shroud, white coffin, and my aunt said that promise her that you will do something in your life and you will achieve something of that sort.
45 years later, Javed, as you look back on your life, have you kept that promise?
I don't think I have kept that promise, but I have not forgotten it, and I'm trying to fulfill it.
Javed Akhtar, I'm sure you will one day. Thank you very much for this wonderful interview.